everyone. I'm so excited today. But before we begin, I always do some cleansing, some smudging, some praying. But I feel like today, with our guests and with all of you and things happening, if we could just spend a moment just getting centered. So if you want to, you can close your eyes if you're not driving, and just take a breath. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And again. And now it's like you're breathing from your heart, through your heart, taking the oxygen in and taking it out. Breathing out the carbon and breathing in the oxygen, the gifts from our plant relatives. In this very important relationship. Reminds us with every breath we do nothing alone. So as you listen here today to this wonderful conversation we're going to have, I invite you to be fully present. I invite you to be aware of your ancestors, those who have been, and even those who are to come. And that we're spending our time intentionally with joy and responsibility. Thank you for this day. Oh, you may open your eyes. And with that, I just want to say, welcome, Kimberly. This
Good to
is
be here.
Kimberly Braveheart, and she is, what can I say? It's like fireworks, is because everywhere she goes, she lights up the area, and you're gonna learn some about that. What I realized from getting to know her is that part of that lighting up is because she knows she is part of everything, and she is light. So it's just wonderful. So let me tell you a little bit specifically about Chef Braveheart. She's a citizen of the Ogallala Lakota Nation of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. She instinctually embraces both her indigenous and Jewish heritage. She has always held a deep respect for people and has the ability to tell the history and stories of her people through her food. Chef Braveheart strives to combine the power of storytelling, cultural preservation, and gastronomy to create unique experiences that educate and delight audiences. She's a professional, international, inspirational speaker and Indigenous chef. She leverages this expertise in the culinary arts, her cultural heritage, and entrepreneurial expertise to deliver captivating presentations, cooking demonstrations, and immersive dining experiences. But we're also in a time where I know that Kimberly is starting to not change where she's going, but go deeper into speaking and educating and connecting the cultural significance of what she does, and also a food sovereignty. So I'm excited for us to all learn a lot more. Let me just tell you about a few. She has too many awards to say them all, and she has an incredible, diverse history leading up to now of all the different things she did. So maybe we'll get into some of those. She has received numerous awards and has been featured in numerous media outlets, including Food Travel Magazine, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and the New York Times. She, in 2023, was honored as the World Wildlife Foundation as Chef of the Year. And that's a testament to you, Kimberly, and your dedication to sustainability and ethical culinary practices. So that's absolutely wonderful. Also, I think it's in the spring, and we'll make sure that's on the website. But you may see Kimberly because Guy, the man who travels around and he does this amazing TV show, actually came to your place and came in and was with you. So I'm excited for my guests that beyond what they're receiving here, that there are many ways. And I'll also make sure to say before we end it on the website, how to get a hold of you, how to learn more about you. So thank you for being here, Chef
Thank
Braveheart.
you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so great. So let's just start. I want folks to get to know a bit about you before we dive into not only who you are, but what you do. But let's just start with your name. What is the meaning of your name? Um, how does it relate to your relatives and things? And then right next to that, because sometimes people weave them together, is the place where you grew up. So these are very special things about who you are and that connection to the sacred earth.
Sure. So my name is my birth name was Kimberly Tilson, Kimberly Rose Tilson. And then my Lakota name is Wambly Wakawi, which means Holy Eagle Woman. And for both of those names, I was actually named after a young woman named Kimberly Rose Means, who was killed 10 days before I was born. And she was like a daughter to my father and mother. And so my parents, although being both Jewish and Lakota, went to her parents and said, can we honor Kimberly Rose by naming our daughter after her? And it is a powerful thing to carry someone else's name, and someone else's name who died in tragedy,
Mm.
because you don't just live your life for you, you live the life for the other person who didn't get to live their life. And I carry not only her English name, but I also carry her Lakota name too. And her family and our family did a ceremony called um, Hunka, making of a relative. And her parents, Rita and Ted Means, adopted me in our way, and all of their children adopted me as their sister. And so my family, of which I had already a large family, is huge. Um, and Chef Braveheart, I was married for 17 years. And my husband at the time, had given me that name. And I chose to keep that name because it had already built a career around that name. And I like both in English and Lakota. In Lakota, we say Chante Tiza, which is Braveheart. And I love not only the cultural implications, but also the significance of being a person that has a brave heart, that carries themselves through the world with their heart open and willing to forgive and willing to experience new things and willing to see the world for the beauty that it is and not just the hardship that it carries.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
Before you
I
tell us
mean,
about the place, I
oh,
want to just say, oh my gosh, um, when you were saying how you're named after a person, a lot of people are named after, but given the story of this person who didn't have a very long life, Kimberly Rose, it's such an honor. And I could just feel it. I just feel that presence. And also knowing that these connections that we have are so powerful. And I'm sure it's impacting you. And so, with that, maybe you can tell me a little bit about where you did grow up and places that are really important to you.
sure. I'm born on Pine Ridge, in Pine Ridge Village, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. My family, our community is called Porcupine, our Pahisende, and my family still owns land there. We still have a family home there. I believe we always will. Um, and I also grew up in the Twin Cities too. But my dad raised me and my brothers by himself, and my mother was always a part of our life, teaching us cultural things, and we would come home for ceremonies and celebrations and funerals. But I really commend my parents because they made a commitment when they had ended their relationship, that they made a commitment to raising us immersed in both cultures. And so I have always known who I am and where I come from, and both of my cultural teachings on my Jewish family as well as my Lakota family.
Yeah, I love that. That commitment they made that you would know who you are, and you do know who you are. And what I'm discovering is that many people don't know. And so it's an invitation. It's not a judgment, but it's invitation that you can find out. And even for some of us who do know, like I know quite a bit about my Nawa, my Aztecan background, I'm still learning about the Toltec and my relative, the part of my ancestry that's from the Amazon that I didn't learn much till much later, really recently. And so a part of me says, oh, I just have a lot more to find out, to discover this time that will enrich my family and then the future generations, because we do know that and then can get the help. So that's wonderful. Do you have anything else you want to say about your name or your places?
I think that a lot of times when people hear Pine Ridge,
Mhm.
they hear of the poverty porn or the statistics of how hard life is there. And being from there, I actually didn't know that we were poor. I grew up in a house where we pumped water and where we had a um, wood stove to heat our home. And my very first bed was actually a drawer in a dresser, literally a drawer in a dresser. And when I looked back at my childhood, I didn't really understand what poverty was. I thought that I was like the luckiest girl in the earth, to be surrounded by land, and my people and my family and my relatives. And it wasn't actually until I went to college that I realized I come from the poorest reservation in America. And I feel really proud of where I come from. And not just because of my story, but because I come from warriors. And I come from a people committed and rich of their culture and connection to the earth. And so, sure, economically, we may be impoverished, but culturally, we are extremely wealthy, the wealthiest county in America.
I'm glad you said that because it's really true. So much of mainstream, what we hear people when they talk about poverty, there's the financial, the monetary poverty that people have, but they don't talk about generally the ancestral poverty, the connection poverty, the, you know, love poverty, all these other things that you are very rich in. And everyone I've met, which is not a lot of people, but a handful from your reservation, that is not the first word that come up for me, but I'm glad you said that because I think that's true. That a lot of people would say, "Oh my gosh, she came from Pine Ridge and she's done all these things and it's amazing." And you are amazing, and there's a reason um, that you're able to do what you do. So maybe you could say if there's anything more to say, like how does being those names, that place that you're still connected to both of them, how did that relate to the journey that you've been on and to make you the chef Braveheart, like, so what was that about? How did you do this?
You know, um, I think that from a very early age, I realized how important this name was, how important Kimberly Rose was. She died, she was killed when she was 12 years old by a drunk driver on a run for political Native prisoners that was called the Run for Freedom.
Mhm.
And the run stopped at the moment she was killed and was never completed. And people would tell me when I was younger, about her and about what happened. And it really impacted me because I realized that I was in her footsteps, but like also kind of weirdly walking alongside her.
Mm.
And when I was 11 years old, I was given a task by my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Jacobson, who I love. And she said, I want you to write a book that could change the world. And when I look back at that now at 42, I'm like, wow, what a task to give a, 11-year-old child. And I wrote a book called The Run for Freedom.
Mm.
And in that book, it was talking about Kimberly and what happened at the moment she passed. And what I realized is that if I could complete her run and I could complete that chapter for her, I would be allowed for my own existence and to create my own story, and that I wasn't in her shadow, but I would be able to honor her alongside of honoring my individuality. And so this book, I still have a copy of it, was about that. And I brought the book to my family, and being who the Tilsons are, they're social justice organizers. I brought it to my family, and my dad, without question, said, let's finish the run. And so my Aunt Barb and I would travel all over the Twin Cities. My Aunt Barb has a beautiful song called The Run for Freedom for Kimberly Rose. And this book, and she would sing and I would read it, and we would sell the book for $10, and we would raise the money for the run. And all of our family, the Means family and the Tilson family, organized runners from the very moment of where she passed. And it was all about ceremony. So when we all gathered, their family and my family, and we had over 350 runners.
Wow.
And imagine at 11 that you write this story, but you also have the adults in your life. I have no idea why it got me emotional for a second, but
It's okay.
you also had the adults in my life who said, this is important for us to support you and to support and complete this ceremony, complete this dream for a little girl who's no longer here. And a lot of people supported us. People who couldn't be there, helped raise money, helped do little fundraisers of Indian taco sales and other things. And my family helped organize it, because a run across the entire state of South Dakota is not an easy feat. And so at the moment of the run, we went to where she passed, and we gathered in a circle and we prayed. And for her family, I could feel the emotional weight of it, of what it meant to, I wouldn't say say goodbye to her, but what it meant to be able to grieve and to let go. And I would never consider myself a runner. And when I ran, I carried this sacred staff of prayer. And I could feel, it sounds weird when I think back at it, but I could feel the release of feel like carrying her. And there's a picture of me, and I could literally see me also regaining my own freedom of my own self-identity. And so when we think about names, there's power in names and the power that we give our children. I'm a mother of 3, and for every one of my children, I had a dream about what I would name them. And I think that when we allow ourselves to be in that sacred space of parenting, of mothering, of birthing, of caring, that if we really give into it, that they already tell us who they are. And I believe that even when Kimberly passed, that they had already known that I would also be Kimberly Rose, that I would be Wambly Wakamwi. And I own that now. I own who I am, and I own both my Lakota name and my English name. And I think that because of that, I have always tried to carry myself in a way that not only honors my parents and my own family, but also honors Kimberly and her memory and her family and her siblings and her parents. And I'm really proud that we are still together, that we are still connected. Her sisters are my sisters. Like, if I need something, that's who I will call. If I need a sister. And I think that as a lot of times, like, I was laughing because I told my dad one time, I said, "What were you going to name me if you weren't going to name me Kimberly Rose?" And he said, "I was going to name you Gertie." And your full name would have been Gertrude. Gertrude Ray. I was like, "Really?" And I thought about who that person would be, and I couldn't imagine that being my name. And so yeah, I think it's powerful.
It is very powerful, and to think about all of that beginning as 11-year-old. So now you're actually shining the light on Lana, like, how did you, from your beginnings, move into this really powerful place of being a chef, but and the whole philosophy, but food sovereignty and um, knowing our cultures, and it's so full and big. But now, as you tell me who you are, both in honoring and freeing Kimberly, but also honoring and freeing you, the Kimberly Rose, as well, that it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that, being Lakota, at a very early age, I learned the importance of hospitality, of care. My mother suffers from severe, severe rheumatoid arthritis. But when she knew visitors were coming, she would get up early before the sun and she would set her dough. And she would make cowboy coffee on the stove, on the wood stove. And the house had a certain smell. And she would clean the dining room table and she would set out cloth napkins. And I think about that, like, my mother had cloth napkins. you know, um, how, why? And even with very little of what she materialistically had, it felt very special. And I really was important to me. And then as I started to get older, and my father moved us, me and my two brothers, off of the reservation to Minnesota. My dad is a terrible cook, like, absolutely terrible cook. And I grew up with my mother's cooking, that even though it wasn't, I would say, fancy or necessarily sophisticated, but it was like wrapped up in love.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite soups, I just posted it the other day, that she would make, it was bean soup. And, she would cook it. She would make the bone broth before I ever knew what bone broth was, from a whole chicken. And she would make that the day before. And then she would soak the beans in that stock. And then she would slowly cook it all day. And then she would make this skillet bread that was fluffy and with a crispy edge. And you would put butter on it. And the two of them together just felt like love. And when I moved away from my mom, I needed to provide it for myself, but I also realized, being the only woman in the house, that I needed to provide it for my brothers too,
Mhm.
because they were younger than me. And I wanted them to know that connection of food is medicine, but food is love too. And as I said, my dad was a terrible cook. And he was, like, very much like a dad, "You're gonna eat what I make." And, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Elf, but where he makes spaghetti and puts maple syrup on it. That's, like, the level of what we're talking about with my dad, okay? It's not just like, oh, he like didn't know how to make a grilled cheese. No, my dad is an ultra creative. So my dad would open all the cupboards and the refrigerators and be like, oh, I got clams, I got this, with no recollection of like a recipe or flavor profile or anything like that. And he made something like clam spaghetti with maple syrup. And I could not eat it. I like sat there and I was like crying. And I said, I need to call my grandmother. And he said, okay. And I called her and I said, Grandma, I need to learn how to cook.
Mm.
And she said, I'm not the best cook, but you can come over and I'll teach you. And from there, the very first thing I ever made, keep in mind I was about 8 years old, was a roasted chicken. And she told me every person, no matter who you are or where you come from, or you need to learn how to roast a whole chicken, because if you can roast a whole chicken, you can feed a family of 5 for a week. And I was like, what?
Wow.
She said, you can make bone broth. You can roast the chicken eat it with salad or vegetables. You can make it into enchiladas. You can make it into soup. You can, and I was like, okay. And so she taught me her method of roasting that chicken. And she, it's funny because for me, she taught me how to cook. And all of my aunties say that my grandmother was never that great of a cook. And I'm like, well, I'm a really
Mm.
good cook. So I think it was kind of like this like magic between her and I. And then when I would come home to the reservation to be with my mom, as I said, my mom had severe rheumatoid arthritis. So ever since I was about 3 years old, I had been kneading my mom's dough for her. And my mom would tell me, you don't ever cook if you are angry. You don't ever cook if you're crying. This is medicine you're preparing. So when you cook this food, even if you don't know the people, you pray for them. You pray that their homes and their children and themselves, you pray health and well-being over them, and you get blessings in return. In our culture, in every meal prayer, it says, I want to bless the hands that prepare this food. And for a long time, I really never understood that. And then as I've gotten older, as you said, I'm a person who carries light. And I think of all of the thousands of meals I have prepared and how many times other people have prayed over me and my hands.
Mhm.
And that food, even if you didn't know someone, that you could nurture them and that you couldn't give them nutrition. And I knew that from a really young age. And so when I would come home, I would ask her all kinds of things. And I told her I loved cooking. And this one time, my big brother, he's kind of crazy. He's really has a great sense of humor, but he would call himself a roughneck too. I was really hungry and I definitely grew up knowing what food scarcity was,
Mm.
but they could make magic out of literally nothing. And he taught me how to make French toast. And he said it's really easy. And if you don't have a lot of food, it's a way to make a big meal and filling meal. And he showed me how to do it. And he said, and my favorite trick is I crumble crackers. Like I crumble like from commodities, like the regular, crackers. He said I crumble them up into the batter and it makes a texture. And I remember when he said texture that I was like, oh, like I don't know how to explain it. It was this explode. Like I remember it very significantly of knowing what like a flat, uncrusted French toast felt like and what it felt like to have a fluffy texture, crunch to this. And I thought, how amazing that somebody just could be innovative themselves and be creative. And nobody is saying, oh, you can't do that. But he did it out of experimenting and survival, and how beautiful that was. And also how cool it is to like really make a beautiful meal and basically bread and eggs. And I remember, and I still have him make me French toast because it's this nostalgic memory and food memory. And I think that food memories are so important to people, and sometimes we forget the
Yeah.
the nostalgia or the spirit that connects us through it.
Well, and all the yes, as you were saying, first of all, I was getting hungry and I've already eaten. So I'm sure that the viewers are feeling the same thing. It's just, I can taste it. But so many lessons in what you're talking about and that you did this so young. So it feels to me, it seems like, oh, you've been living your legacy. I'm sure there were some nobody goes directly, but it feels, that's what it sounds like. You've lived it. But some of the things I just don't want us to lose, because I think they're really important this time, is that, you have enough. There's sufficiency. So even you just said bread and eggs or a chicken and how it could last a week, it was already learning those lessons about you don't need to take too much. You have enough. And you use your creativity and everything like that. But also then food is medicine because of the love. When you said that, oh my gosh, I don't know her, but either one of them, but I love your grandmother and your mom, because my grandmother would always, I'd watch her when she was in the kitchen and she was always doing things and there were offerings and then I realized, when you're little, you don't always pay attention. Then I realized at home when my mom, she would do these things and it was the same thing that they were teaching us. So I guess maybe it's somewhat universal. That came from the Aztecan as well and Toltec, but you do love. And so to this day, if I usually wake up so alive at 5 and I love to do most of the cooking, prepping then, because if I'm at all grouchy, I don't want to do it. And that's what you're talking about. Food is medicine. So,
Yeah.
so tell us more about, so anyway, I know there are even more lessons on there, but I just love all that because it feels like, Kimberly, you've integrated all this, not only about food, but I think it's about life and about your culture and what it brings. So, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about, you know, um, I know you're modest, but this woman has her menus, her food at the Kennedy Center, the first Indigenous person to that's just like amazing. And all these shows you've been on and just amazing food. But um, maybe tell us so we have a better understanding, because it sounds like it's important of love, the transferring, the connection of all this, but also food sovereignty and what that means at this time and the importance of culture at this time. Yes, just tell us a little bit about how you
I I
look at
think
this.
that oftentimes people in this country don't quite understand reservations or Native American history. And, our people were forced on to reservations. Oglalas were the last to surrender. That's my tribe. And we were warriors, which means like we were hunters and protectors. And so we were nomadic people. We traveled all the way from way north Canada all the way to South America. We had a trade route. And so we never stayed in one place. And so our means of survival was the buffalo. And the buffalo was our complete, um, holistically commerce. In Lakota, we call them the Pate Oyate, the buffalo people, the buffalo nation. And we had a very symbiotic relationship with the buffalo. They were our survival, and they would sacrifice themselves for us, for food, for clothing, for our homes, for our teepees, for our weapons, for the bones we would carve into arrowheads for our arrows. and also to make our own bows, and even the sinew to make the string, and even our regalia, the way that we dressed ourselves. And we used it for commerce as well, for bartering. And then the US government created a policy called Manifest Destiny. And in that policy, the point was for the westward expansion. And one of the main priorities of that was to massacre all of the American bison as we know it. And over nearly 1 billion bison were murdered, stacks and stacks of skulls. Um, and we were forced onto reservations in a place, it's basically an open air concentration camp, and in a destitute area called near the Badlands that was hard to grow things with and hard to hunt. And we weren't allowed to hunt, we weren't allowed to have weapons, and we were given a box by the US government of commodities which had oil, whiskey, flour, and sugar, and things that our people had never eaten. We had never eaten anything sweet other than berries and dried berries. And that's where we enter alcoholism and diabetes and obesity and cancer, because of these foods that were consumed to not sustain us enough to like be fed, but enough to poison us so that we would eventually die. And learning about this history had a profound impact on me, especially as I became a mother, and recognizing the importance of integrating buffalo into my diet, of carrying this sacred being and the medicine and power that that animal would give me as I prepared to birth my son. And I did more and more research about how good buffalo is for you, how good it is for your digestive system and your skin and the quality of your hair, and how destructive commercial cattle and poultry can be. But buffalo actually restore the prairie lands just by the way that they cultivate the earth when they walk and when they're grinding their hoofs. And I thought, oh my gosh, not only are they good for us, but they're good for the environment. And recognizing that our people didn't, fry bread is not a traditional food. It's a colonizer food. It was a food based on the resilience of survival of our people. With given with what they had, they made do. Even they figured out, oh, I could make this bread, I could do this thing. And so even with they had very little, they made this fry bread. But this fry bread, as you know, I mean, the life expectancy on Pine Ridge is the lowest life expectancy in the Western Hemisphere, other than Haiti, in the United States. The average age of a male is 39 years old. The average age of a female is 42 years old. I am 42. And so the life expectancy is extremely short. And I started realizing, like, if we had the ability to start reclaiming of our indigenous food sovereignty, of our indigenous foods, we would survive.
Yeah.
And our people wouldn't just physically regain their survivalship, but they would regain the cultural identity and connection to our spirit. Because that buffalo, the Pate Oyate, and us, we are connected. We are relatives. I have been on more than 12 buffalo hunts, and it's a powerful experience. What happens is the buffalo literally gather in a circle and they have a discussion just like we would. And they talk amongst themselves and they release a between a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old buffalo. And they say that he will sacrifice himself for this hunt. And they separate him from the rest of the herd. And then there's this moment, it's a spiritual moment where that hunter and that buffalo make eye contact. And there's a spiritual conversation that happens between them. And then that buffalo is then shot with one shot, and the herd comes back around to that buffalo to grieve that loss. And so when you think about that, you think about how do I want to treat this animal, this ingredient, this I want to treat it with that same regard and that same honor and respect that their nation has given him when he sacrificed his life. And how powerful to know that the food that you are consuming was based on prayer. My children eat buffalo probably at least a minimum of 3 days a week. But my little one, my 6-year-old, she'll ask me for it. If I'm busy and, I made spaghetti, I'm like a regular single mom, I make regular food too. She'll say, well, I really need tatanka. I need buffalo. And I said, you do? And she says, I do. It's good for my body and it's good for my spirit. And as you were saying earlier, where you're like, I'm learning all the time, every day, Anita, people tell me stories about foraging or medicines or teas or food or the way that we traditionally prepared something. And it's so beautiful to be able to hear the stories of my people through this way of reclamation. And, when we think, a lot of people are intimidated by the word land back. But when I hear land back, this is what I mean, is allow us to regain who we are. You have built a country based on sacrificing of indigenous people. So allow us to reclaim our cultural identity.
Wow. I could listen to you for a long time. Now I can see why you're a messenger of all this. It makes a sense. And and as I hear you say that, one of the things that I could just feel it, because we are taught as Native people that we're not above or below anything other being, and we don't separate the spiritual from the physical, from the mental, emotional. It's all connected. And I was thinking that yes, if we can bring back these very nourishing, that your young daughter already knows, this way of being, this nourishment, we can change things. And it's not only for us. What I realized too is because we know we're all connected. So even for people who are not native, this is important. We are destroying our soils. We are, in every way. I don't want to go down the thing about the whole climate and everything we've done. And yet at the same time, this is serious. This is urgent. And when you talk about, as we learn from what always has been, the animals, what they were doing in terms of fertilizing the earth and the burning that indigenous people did to keep the land, the relationship. It didn't mean we didn't do anything. We had a relationship, and we have a relationship. And that's what's exciting, because I can't even say past tense. I look at you in such a conscious way of understanding that oneness and unity. And so what my hope is that as people are hearing you, I can't imagine not, also can feel that of them coming together in oneness with all that gives us life. And so then out of that, oh my gosh, why wouldn't I be in prayer, understand spirit of another being? Because we're all connected. It's just, it makes no sense. But thank you. That was, I've known you for a while, but I haven't heard you talk about this way. And so I'm really delighted and to know that. So then we still have a little bit more time. I know something there's a transition happening for you, only because in the last few days, I got an email that I know you sent to many people, and it was a joyous email, even though there was some sadness. It said that I know I wrote down some of what you said, but that you were as of the end of February, you were no longer going to be having your restaurant and no longer catering for now. That you're not leaving what you do. The direction's the same, but you're really going deeper. And so I can just imagine it going deeper. But and you talk about really going even further into. Let me just read this quote that came out of there. Food sovereignty is not just about the ingredients on our plate. It is a cultural journey to us and to the roots of our communities. We are this opportunity to continue. We have this. We're excited about this opportunity to continue fostering a deeper understanding of the cultural significance of food and the important preserving indigenous ingredients, and that you want people to stay tuned, because what this is one of the very powerful solutions to some of the problems, the big problems that we have, is that very nature of our relationship, not just the food and the greens, but as you were talking about, spirit in that. So tell us a little bit more about, so what caused this shift, and just give us some of the background of what, because we're going to have fun watching you.
Um, so in every decision I make, I really try to put my children at the forefront of that decision. And I go through this exercise of playing it through, where if I go down this path, how will it impact my children? And if I go down this path, how will it impact my children? And in December, I lost my voice, like completely, like nothing would come out and nobody could figure it out. And it was this like spiritual, I believe, a spiritual experience happening. And it allowed me to be very quiet and to listen. And my house was peaceful and not chaotic and not crazy and not unmanageable. And I couldn't work because I had mono-like symptoms, but I couldn't speak either. And it was like almost going on what we call a humblecha, a vision quest. But I was still with my children, and we were in this like cocoon of sanctuary. And I asked them, write it. What do you want for you? And they said, I love having my mom. I love having my mom with us all the time. And, when you are a chef, you're working most weekends and most nights. And I get up very early for other catering events, and it has taken a physical toll on me. And when I'm feeding a group, I'm feeding 25 people. But when I'm allowed to be on spaces like this or on big spaces, I'm speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of people. And those people then tell the people of their families, their friends, their community of what they heard or listened or learned or experienced through one of my talks. And I realized if I do this, if I transition into storytelling and speaking about these important issues, that I could reach so many more people, because I believe that invisibility is the last step of genocide. And I want the story and history of my people to be told. I want the reclamation of our connectedness to food and to land to happen, not in just my generation and not just in my children's generation, but in the generations to come. And I made a decision to close my little jewel box, beautiful private dining room in downtown Rapid City. And it wasn't an easy decision. But I realized when I was in that space, I went down there and I prayed and I brought medicine and I smudged myself and I allowed myself to grieve. And I gave so much gratitude to that little space because it mothered me. It like incubated me. It made me feel safe and it helped me recover from my divorce. It helped me bring people in my community together that would have never had conversations. And every person who had the opportunity to experience my private dining room, I only seat 10 people at a time. What they would tell me is like, I've never had this dining experience. I feel changed by it, not just because of the beauty and the delicious food, but because I could feel this abundance of love. And, when you go to a restaurant, you don't often get to get that experience of feeling like you're in someone's private home dining room and being fed by a mother. And, but I knew that it was time. And to close a chapter, to be able to open the next chapter, and to hopefully be able to write a book and a cookbook and speak in front of people and, you know, be able to be with my children more and more presently as well. And that was really the decision was like, and we sat together as a family and I told them what I was thinking. And they were all like, "What? Oh my gosh, this is a big thing. This is, hard." And I said, "It's not really. The decision was easy because I'm choosing you and I'm choosing our people and I'm also choosing myself." And I realized that I physically could not work at the capacity I was working at. I think that's why my body had shut down. And so it was this like spiritual journey of releasing, of letting go, of grieving, of also just being incredibly grateful. Like, I am grateful for every single person that I had the opportunity to feed. I'm grateful for every single person who got to experience my beautiful space. And it is sad, but I think that grief doesn't always have to be sad. I think that it can just be like it is. And it's okay to say that was beautiful and amazing and also really, really hard. And I'm ready for something new. And I believe that it is only about expanding. And it doesn't mean that I'm not cooking. I cook every day. I do cooking demos where I get to physically teach people about these ingredients and they get to experience them. And my approach is I really don't want it to be this momentous thing of like, oh, I'm cooking an indigenous meal. I want it to be where you're making wild rice overnight oats for breakfast and you have berries and so you're having 90% indigenous ingredients with a little bit of yogurt. I want it to be incredibly approachable where we are integrating indigenous ingredients multiple times a day in our meals, that is approachable for the everyday person.
It's a great vision. Oh my gosh. I know a little bit about you, but you're transforming to not be able to speak and to have medical people don't know understanding it and being like that for a while. You were able to use that rather than, like, but to transform it, to open up all the possibilities for you. And I know everyone who's listening and those who will be listening are just going to be so excited to follow you and to understand more or deepen that connection that you have, that way of feeding everyone. The other thing I'm going to say, what you said, it's so beautiful that you love your children and the future generations, um, and you love your community. But I think one of the misnomers is to think we sacrifice everything for them. No, because we're connected. So this is the best for you and your health too. And that's
Mhm.
what I hope everyone is hearing is that when we follow our heart, our legacy love is leading us this unity, understanding all our connection. What happens is we have to care for ourselves because then you wouldn't be around. That would be a big loss.
Yeah.
So what you're sharing with your children of like, no, this matters, you matter, but you have to really care for yourself in order to care for others, because then otherwise it'll be just so fleeting. So this is important. So I hope that makes people even more excited, like, because there's nothing selfish about it. There's nothing, I've heard, especially with women, strange things about that. But no, this is how we're able to pass on information, how we're able to live our legacy. Which, from your stories, I can tell you've been preparing probably even before you were 3 when you were telling the stories. But that, and obviously you did tell the story because even where your name came from, which is just really delightful. So tell us, we only have a couple minutes more. I- Um, anything else you want us to know? And I want to include yourself in that. So anything about your dream that's more specific so we can all just, pile in on imaging that dream as along with you.
Sure. I believe that I'm a very good speaker, and I would love to be able to be speaking on big stages all over the country or world even. But also, I really believe that there is so much power in indigenizing health systems, both in the wellness arena, but also in the actual standard health systems that we know today. And as I was saying earlier, food is medicine, love is medicine, and about invigorating and injecting beautiful, healthy foods into the food system so that when people are at the hospital, that they are healing with bone broth, that they are eating buffalo, that they are eating vegetables, that they are eating soups that are healing and nurturing, that they have the access to indigenous teas that are medicinal and healing, and that we start reclaiming of our health, and not just like a diet fad, but like actually integration of all systems. And that's a big, huge goal. And it's beyond me. But I know that I, along with a whole team of other Indigenous chefs and educators and Indigenous botanists, really see the importance and impact of that. So send those good vibes.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vision. And as she said, send those good vibes, definitely send that energy because we know it does make a difference. That's what
So
we're talking about, which is really wonderful. Okay, well, I just want to thank you so much, Kimberly, for being with us. There's so many wonderful things that have inspired at a cellular level, but also just some knowing, some I'm hoping that I know that other people are going to go deeper, whether if they're indigenous, into their own, who they are and what they are and what's calling, but also people who are not of a tribe, of a nation. They also know they have ancestors, and we're all looking to behold and to make sure that life goes on in a thriving way for all of us. So I can't tell you enough in words. So I'm just going to hold my heart and say, thank you so much. All that you shared as a messenger is taken to heart and will be taken to action. And thank you
lovely.
very much.
And
Uh, Go ahead. Do you have something else to say?
in Lakota, we don't ever say goodbye.
Yeah.
We always say Doksha Ake. I'll see you until I see you in this life or the next.
That sounds good to me. And I was just going to say that to all the audiences. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again. And please go to the site and you will see the information of how to get a hold of Kimberly Braveheart, Chef Braveheart, Speaker Braveheart, Educator Braveheart. I see you on those big stages, impacting lots of people in a positive way. So until we see you again,
Doksha Ake.
bye.